All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Wednesday night family Bible study. So glad you joined us. My name is Minister Tavis Campbell, one of the ministers here, and we are studying the book of Joshua. So just want to thank you all for taking the time to join in. Don't know if you had to work today, but if you did, I'm glad you made it home safely. If you work from home, that was an easy day for you. You didn't have to go anywhere. But glad that you joined us here for Bible study. Today we're going to walk through the fourth book of Joshua. But before we do so, just want to open up in a word of prayer. Father, we just thank you for tonight. Thank you for waking us all up today. Thank you for keeping us. Thank you for your protection. Thank you for your love. Thank you for your favor. I thank you for everyone that is here tonight, wherever they're joining from. I pray that as we walk through this fourth chapter of Joshua, that you would speak to us clearly through your word, and that you would speak through me clearly what you want us to learn from this book. We give you the glory. We have great anticipation that you're going to speak to us tonight. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. So like I said, welcome. Really excited to walk through this with us. I had a good day today. It's my off day, so anytime you don't have to work, that's always a good thing. My son had his first flag football game, so that's where I was at. That's why I got my Bancroft blue on, got my hat on. I was out there coaching the kids, having some fun with them. We didn't win, but that just only made me look forward to coming here even more so. So we're going to jump in. If you were here the last couple weeks, you saw that Pastor did an awesome job opening up the book. And then Minister Scott, he followed up with chapter 2. The theme that Pastor shared with us is that the book of Joshua is a book of transitions. And Minister Scott talked about how there was a transaction that took place. And he pointed out that it's a book of transactions. And then last week, Elder Marvin really highlighted the generational aspects. He even went back to Abraham and talked about how this is all a part of God's plan. And so that brings us up to chapter 4. Let me make some announcements before I forget. Good Friday is coming up. And we're going to be here celebrating Good Friday from 7 p.m. all the way through midnight. We love to have you come down and spend a couple hours with us. We're going to have worship, time of strategic prayer. Like I said, from 7 to midnight. I think worship is going to start around 9 p.m. or so. But bring your families, come on out. If you can't make it, Zoom, YouTube will be available. But love to have you bringing in Resurrection Sunday, starting with Good Friday with prayer and worship. And that's 7 p.m. to midnight here at the service, here at the church. All right, so Joshua 4. As I was preparing for this, I thought it was important. Joshua was one of my favorite books, one of my favorite men in the Bible. Just his whole story, his whole journey of walking with the Lord is just an awesome man of God, and how God laid out his life before us through the Word of God is really beautiful. So my thing is, I said, Lord, what do you want me to communicate from this book, to your people? And it only made sense to start with a little bit more information on who Joshua is. So we're going to obviously be going through the book of Joshua 4, but I want to go back a little bit and just look at the life of Joshua and who he was. If we go back to Joshua chapter 1, verse 1, I read a couple verses there. It says, after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass that the Lord spoke to Joshua the son of Nun, Moses' assistant. So I want you to remember that, Moses' assistant, saying, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise and go over this Jordan, you and all this people, to the land which I am giving to them, the children of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given you, as I said to Moses. Remember that, as I said to Moses. From the wilderness and this Lebanon, as far as the great river, the river of Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, to the great sea, toward the going down of the sun shall be your territory. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. This is a promise that God is making to Joshua. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you nor forsake you. Be strong and of good courage, for this people you shall divide as an inheritance the land which I swore to their fathers to give to them. Only be strong and very courageous. So we see here in the beginning of this chapter here, God is making an amazing promise to Joshua. He says a few things. He says, I'm going to be with you, right? And then we see in verse 5 that no man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. What an amazing promise. You know, if you're getting ready to go out and do something for the Lord, there's no greater assurance to know, said, hey, I'm getting ready to send you on this mission and I've prepared you for this. I'm going to be with you all the days of your life. No matter what you face, no matter how large the enemy ahead of you, no matter what turbulence you may get from the people that you're leading, I'm going to be with you all the days of your life. So Joshua had this already in his mind. He had it already in his heart, and God had already spoken this promise to him. So we see him leading with that assurance, knowing that God went before him, God is with him all the days of his life. So that's a promise that Joshua had. As we continue to read chapter 1, there's some things that you see throughout the entire book as we walk through this whole book, through the whole book of Joshua, is some common themes. He said, I'm going to be with you just like I'm with Moses. That's a common theme. That's the generational piece of it. As he was with Moses, he's now going to be with Joshua. Let's take a little bit closer look at Joshua, like I said, and let's look at Deuteronomy 31. And what I want to point out from these few verses that we're going to read here was that promise that God made from directly to Joshua, that he was going to be with him. So we look here, and we can see from Deuteronomy chapter 31, we can see the transition that Pastor was talking about, which brings us up to the book of Joshua. So we're going to go to the beginning of that. So Deuteronomy 31, and let's pick it up in verse 14. Then the Lord said to Moses, behold, the days approach when you must die. Call Joshua and present yourself in the tabernacle of meeting, that I may inaugurate him. So Moses and Joshua went and presented themselves in the tabernacle of meeting. Now the Lord appeared at the tabernacle in a pillar of cloud, and the pillar of cloud stood above the door of the tabernacle. So what we see here is now Israel, Joshua is being raised up as the new leader of Israel. And so we pick this up where God is speaking to Moses. Joshua is going to be the leader that's going to finish the mission. And we see this here, that the Lord speaks to Moses in verse 14. And he tells him, hey, behold, the days are approaching when you must die. Call Joshua and present yourself in the tabernacle of meeting. Why? So that he can promote him into this new role that he has for him, so that he can inaugurate him, identify him as the next leader of Israel. And we look here in the following verses, Moses and Joshua, they were obedient. They presented themselves in the tabernacle of meeting. And we see that the Lord appeared to them there and began to talk to both Moses and Joshua about what he was going to do for them and why Joshua was the man for the job. Verse 22, it says, therefore Moses wrote this song the same day and taught it to the children of Israel. Then he inaugurated Joshua, the son of Nun, and said, be strong and of good courage, for you shall bring the children of Israel into the land which I swore to them. And once again, I will be with you. So we see Joshua is getting some tremendous promises made to him by the Lord. The Lord is speaking to him directly, as we saw in Joshua 1, But then we see here the Lord speaking through Moses, speaking to Moses and Joshua here in the Tabernacle of Meeting. And what is he confirming? He's confirming the message that he told them, that I will be with you. So what does that do? That gives Moses and Joshua peace in leading the people, knowing that they're not doing it on their own, right? That God has called them to do it, prepared them to do it, and he's going to commission and send them to do it, but he's going to be with them throughout the journey. So we see the Lord saying, I'm instructing you just as I instructed Moses. We see here, he says, I'm going to be with you just as I was with Moses. And they were obedient to receive the instructions from the Lord in the Tabernacle of Meeting. Let's look at Exodus 33. We're just going to learn a little bit about Joshua and his process. So Exodus 33, you don't have to turn there, but I just want to point something out. In Joshua chapter 1, verse 1, once again, I read that one verse. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass that the Lord spoke to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' assistant. Okay, so at this point, he was Moses' assistant. So talking about the process, right, of how he went from being assistant to now the leader of Israel. Exodus chapter 33, verse 7. One of my, I love this verse. I love that the fact that we can look at this and see the relationship with Moses and Joseph. Joshua, rather, Moses and Joshua, the son of Nun. All right, so verse 7. Moses took his tent and pitched it outside the camp, far from the camp, and called it the Tabernacle of Meeting. Okay, so we just read that the Lord met with Moses and he met with Joshua at the Tabernacle of Meeting once they had the exchange of leadership there. And it came to pass that everyone who sought the Lord went out to the Tabernacle of Meeting, which was outside the camp. So it was, whenever Moses went out to the tabernacle, that all the people rose, and each man stood at his tent door and watched Moses until he had gone into the tabernacle. So picture this. People are standing in front of their tents. The men are standing in front of their tent doors, standing in front of their household. Families are there. And as Moses is going into the tent, they're all observing that. Verse 8 tells us, so it was whenever Moses went into the tabernacle that all the people rose, each man stood at the tent door and watched Moses until he had gone into the tabernacle. And it came to pass when Moses entered the tabernacle that the pillar of cloud descended and stood at the door of the tabernacle. And the Lord talked with Moses. All the people saw the pillar of cloud standing at the tabernacle door, and all the people rose and worshiped, each man in his tent door. They saw Moses go in, they saw the pillar of cloud descend on the tabernacle, and they began to worship right there at their tent. Verse 11, so the Lord spoke to Moses face to face, as a man speaks to his friend, and he would return to the camp, but his servant or his assistant, Joshua, the son of Nun, a young man, did not depart from the tabernacle. I love this. It paints a picture that Joshua, though he was Moses' assistant, he had a great love for the presence of God. It clearly says that the Lord was speaking with Moses face to face in the Tabernacle of Meeting, and it clearly tells us that his assistant or his servant, Joshua, the son of Nun, was there. Moses left out of the Tabernacle Meeting once he received his instructions. And if you read verse 12 and on, you begin to see he begins to talk to them and talk to the Lord. And the Lord made a promise. Moses was like, I don't want to go lead these people if your presence doesn't go with me. And what did the Lord do in verse 11? He said, my presence will go with you and I will give you rest. So we see here that Moses was receiving instructions from the Lord in the Tabernacle of Meeting. And Joshua, the son of Nun, where was he at? He was right there watching. He was observing how the leader, how this man of God was approaching God, how he would interact with God, how God would speak to him. What I wrote down here, this was a part of the process of learning how to seek God. He learned how to seek God. He learned how to recognize God's presence in his life or in the life of Moses in this instance here. This is a very pivotal point. This is a key quality of Joshua, is that he loved the presence of God, and he learned how to hear God's voice by being in the presence of God. There's opportunities for us here, right, in this day and age, and at this church that we go to, whether it's a Sunday service, whether it's a Wednesday night Bible study, whether it's a Saturday morning prayer, where you can get around men and women of God, a women's Bible study during the week. There's just a lot of opportunities where you can get around men and women of God who are seeking his face and sharing what God is saying with us. That's how we learn how to hear God's voice and determine when and how he's speaking. Well, that's what Joshua did far before he became the leader of Israel. So this is a pivotal point and also an important quality of Joshua. He loved the presence of God. And when Moses left, he said, I'm gonna hang here a little bit longer. And we don't know what the Lord was speaking to Joshua, but we know he was captured in the presence there as a part of his process, going from assistant. What an awesome thing to be an assistant to a man like that. We all know Moses' testimony, and I'm sure obviously the people who he was leading knew the testimony of Moses. So for him to be that close to him and be able to learn from him was a part of God's plan the whole time, because he knew that he was going to need Joshua to lead the children of Israel through the Jordan, to cross the Jordan and to inherit the promised land. But this is the beginning. This is why God chose Joshua. All right, so let's look at, for learning, he learned how to seek. He learned how to hear from God. He also was able to see Moses' interactions with the Lord. Let's take a look at Numbers chapter 13. We're just doing a little background about Joshua, and we're going to jump in and see what he did in chapter 4. And man, it's just going to really, really enrich the study. All right, so Numbers chapter 13. We saw in Joshua chapter 1, he was referred to as Moses' assistant. We see in Exodus what he did, just being in love with the presence of God and how close he was to Moses. Now we're going to see the continuation of the transition in his individual life as he goes on. So it says here in Numbers 13, verse 1. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, send men to spy out the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the children of Israel. From each tribe of their fathers you shall send a man, every one a leader among them. So Moses sent from the wilderness of Paran, according to the commandment of the Lord, all of them men who were heads of the children of Israel. Now these were the names. And then what is outlined are all 12 men that Moses had selected at the direction of the Lord. He said, I want you to choose 12 men. I want each one representing all 12 tribes. And I want you to send them out to go spy out Canaan. And Elder Marvin did a good job of breaking down what Canaan was and why they were sent there. But this is the beginning of them being commissioned to Canaan. And as you see here in verse 6, the names that we know that came back with the right report was Caleb in verse 6. You see at the end of verse 7, it says, verse 8 rather, that Hosea from the tribe of Ephraim. If you jump down to verse 16, it says, these are the names of the men whom Moses sent to spy out the land. And Moses called Hosea the son of Nun, Joshua. So we see here what he first was the assistant and the servant. But we see here in 13, verse 2, that he goes from being an assistant to now being one of the leaders that is going to be sent out as a spy. It says here, send men to spy out the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the children of Israel. From each tribe of their fathers you shall send a man, each one a leader among them. A leader. So Joshua was an assistant and a servant. Now when it's time to send someone out, he has proven his character to Moses. When he says, I want you to send out 12, he's one of the 12 that is mentioned. He's one of the 12 that was included. And then you see from verse 17, he tells them what he wants them to do when they get to Canaan. Obviously, look at the fruit, give a report on the people, give a report on the land. Is it a good land? Bring back a report to me of what you see. So the 12, they go out. They all go out, and then they all see what they see. They all see the same thing, but they have a different report. Okay, let's jump to verse 30. It says here, after they get back and they provide their report, Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and take possessions, for we are well able to overcome it. The reason why I jumped to verse 30, because all of the other reports was about how the size of the giants and how difficult it was. They weren't truthful. They didn't give God's view, right, of what they saw. They majored on the minors. They made things bigger than what they were. There were giants in the land, but they minimized what God was able to do with them. Well, Caleb and Joshua, they had a different report. If we're staying in Numbers, let's look at chapter 14, jump down to verse 6. Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh were among those who had spied out the land, tore their clothes, and spoke to all the congregation and the children of Israel, saying, the land we passed through to spy out is exceedingly good land. This is the report of Joshua and Caleb. If the Lord delights in us, then he will bring us into the land and give it to us, a land which flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord, nor fear the people of the land, for they are our bread. Their protection has departed from them, and the Lord is with us. The Lord is with us. Do not fear them. And all the congregation said to stone them with stones. They didn't want to hear that. They didn't want to hear the report of the Lord. Now the glory of the Lord appeared in the tabernacle of meeting before all the children of Israel. Once again, we see a common place where God would meet with Joshua, and he became familiar with that, which was the tabernacle of meeting. In this instance here, as Joshua and Caleb are given a report of what they saw, it says in verse 10, now the glory of the Lord appeared in the tabernacle of meeting before all the children of Israel. Then the Lord said to Moses, how long will this people reject me? How long will they not believe me with all the signs which I have performed among them? As I read that response from the Lord lets me know that Caleb and Joshua's report is the report of the Lord. Because he's responding after Joshua and Caleb are given their report. He manifests himself in the tabernacle of meeting and begins to speak with Moses. His frustration with them not receiving and believing and not really trusting what the Lord has showed them. So when we have the report of the Lord, God is going to always support us and back us up when we see things the way that he wants us to see them. And that's a quality and characteristic that Joshua had. He learned how to seek the Lord. He learned how to hear from him through watching Moses and his own interactions with the Lord. He learned how to hear his voice and to communicate with him and really believe what the Lord was speaking to him. When they sent him to go spy out the land, they just brought back what they found, right? They didn't add to it. They didn't take away from it. They just reported what they saw, and the Lord was clearly frustrated and unpleased with those who didn't report the report of the Lord. So we see him going from an assistant to now a leader who was chosen as one of the 12, as a huge part of he played a huge role in that mission. All right, so he went from being a spy. All right, so let's take a look at, Deuteronomy 31. We just learned a little bit more about Joshua. You know, he loved the presence of God. He went from being an assistant to Moses to then being inaugurated in the Tabernacle of Meeting when it was just the Lord, Moses, and Joshua. God had already called him and prepared him for this moment. Deuteronomy 31. We're getting closer to Joshua 30, the book of Joshua. All right, so Deuteronomy 31. Oh, we covered that. Okay, that was a point that I want to make there. All right, so let's go ahead and let's pick up here. Joshua 4. Joshua 4, verse 1. And it came to pass, when all the people had completely crossed over the Jordan, that the Lord spoke to Joshua, saying, Take for yourselves 12 men from the people, one man from every tribe, and command them, saying, Take for yourselves 12 stones from here, out of the midst of the Jordan, from the place where the priest's feet stood firm. You should carry them over with you, and leave them in the lodging place where you lodge tonight. Then Joshua called the 12 men, whom he appointed from the children of Israel, one man from every tribe. Does this sound familiar? You see why I want to go back to see why, at the beginning of Joshua? Because if we just jump in right there, this would bless us. But God will continue to paint the picture for us all. Then Joshua called the 12 men whom he appointed from the children of Israel, one man from every tribe. And Joshua said to them, Cross over before the ark of the Lord your God into the midst of the Jordan, and each one of you take up a stone on his shoulder, according to the number of tribes of the children of Israel, that this may be a sign among you, when your children ask you in time comes, saying, What do these stones mean? Oh my goodness. So let me stop right here. When I read that, I'm like, man, I read that before. And his experiences, I guess what I got from this, you guys, is that the Lord is consistent. We know he doesn't change. He's the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. Joshua went from being the assistant to Moses, seeing how Moses interacted with the Lord, seeing how he valued the Tabernacle of Meeting, seeing how he heard and spoke with the Lord face to face, seeing how the Lord gave him instructions and how he took those instructions and communicated them with the people. Whether they received them or not, all the time, he was able to experience that. When it came called to be one of the 12, he was one of the 12. So he was able to see how the Lord was moving through the children of Israel and what he was commanding Moses. As we look here, now we see Moses. Now we see Joshua doing what Moses did, hearing from the Lord, communicating it to the people. And we see some of the things that are saying, I want you to take a man from each tribe. Let's go back and look at these verses here. Verse 1, and it came to pass when the people had completely crossed over the Jordan, that the Lord spoke to Joshua. Meaning, once everybody had got through the Jordan, that's what completely crossed over, that the Lord spoke to him saying, now I want you to take for yourself 12 men from the people, one man from every tribe, and command them, saying, Take for yourselves 12 stones from here, out of the midst of the Jordan. Let's stop. This was a big feat that Joshua was left with. But it was a part of God's promise that he made to Moses, that he said the children of Israel are going to have to cross through the Jordan River. You're not going to do it, but I'm going to raise up someone who is going to do it. This moment had already been prophesied, and God had prepared both Moses and Joshua for this moment. And so it was a big undertaking. We see Joshua, he's already been told by the Lord, I'm going to be with you for the rest of your life. I'm going to lead you. I'm going to guide you. Just trust me. Report to me what you hear. And whatever I command you to do, just do it. Don't think about it, just do it. If you look here, it says once they completely crossed over the Jordan, that the Lord spoke to Joshua. God did not speak to Joshua while everybody was on this side of the Jordan of what to do with those 12 stones. He spoke that instruction once everybody had already passed through the other side. And as we continue to read, we're going to see how significant that was. So everybody completely crossed over. Then the Lord spoke to Joshua. The next instructions. Lord, I got everybody over here. What do I do now? Here's what I want you to do, Joshua. I want you to take 12 men, tell them to go back and grab a stone, right, from the place where the priest's feet stood firm. You shall carry them over with you and leave them in the lodging place where you lodge tonight. So let's picture this. They crossed over. Everybody's standing over there, crossed over. Joshua said, all right, I need 12. Boom, 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 boom. He began to pick 12 men. I need you guys to go back in the Jordan River that the Lord just parted, right? I need you to go back in there, and I need all 12 of you to grab one stone, put it on your shoulder, and carry it back to the place that we're lodging tonight. Looking at that, that's an instruction you want to receive after you've already crossed the Jordan. Because otherwise, if you receive it before, people may have been trying to pick up stones as they were walking. God was very clear. No. Get everybody across first. Do the first thing first. Once they did that and they did it successfully, God had already a plan in place for them to mark that as a memorial so that they wouldn't forget. But he didn't give them that instruction until after they finished the first thing that he had asked them to do, which was a huge thing, as we're going to continue to read. But as I was reading it, I'm like, Lord, I knew you had to give him that instruction afterward. Because too many instructions on a big move like that can be like, hold on, Lord, what did you say? Get the stones first? What are we supposed to do? He just kept it simple. Tell the priest to get in the water, cross over. Lord, what do I do now? Send 12 people to go get the stones, put them on their shoulders, and take them to the place where they're going to be lodging. The Lord was speaking very clearly to Joshua. And he was a man that fell in love with the presence of God and learned how to hear what the Lord was saying by observation as an assistant, but also, too, as a part of his commission when he was inaugurated. That, hey, you're going to be the person who's going to lead my church, and I'm going to speak to you, and I'm going to be with you all the days of your life. Then Joshua called the 12 men whom he appointed from the children of Israel, one man from every tribe. And remember, Moses did the same thing with Joshua. That's how he went from an assistant to now a leader who was sent out to spy the land. Well, guess what? God spoke the same instruction to Joshua. Get a representative from each tribe and send them in back to the Jordan to grab a stone to build for the memorial. And Joshua said to them, cross over before the ark of the Lord, your God, into the midst of the Jordan. And each one of you take up a stone on his shoulder. So the instructions are even getting more clear. So it's amazing here. God speaks this first to who? Joshua. And he speaks into him at the end of him completing the first phase of his instruction of, I'm getting ready to take you guys across the Jordan. The second thing he spoke to them was what to do with the stones. But he didn't speak to him. Joshua didn't speak to the people until he got the instructions from God. He got the instruction from God, and then he communicates it to them in these verses that we're reading. Each one of you take up a stone on his shoulder according to the number of tribes of the children of Israel, that this may be a sign among you when your children ask in time to come, saying, what do these stones mean? I can only imagine. This, as we read, it's going to tell us it was 40,000 armed men that went in front of the priest, along with all the children of Israel that had to pass through. This took time, y'all. It wasn't quick. Though they were hurrying, as we're going to read here, they were hurrying to get across, but this took time to get everybody through there. With all of that time that's taken, then you pause and say, Lord, what do you want me to do next while the priests are still standing in the water? The priests had enough confidence in Joshua as a leader to stay in place until they got their next instruction. So let's read. According to verse 6, that this may be a sign among you when your children ask in time to come, saying, what do these stones mean? Then you should answer them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off. So he's telling them this is going to be the testimony of these stones that you took out of the Jordan. This is why I'm having them to go back and get those stones. That you shall answer them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord when it crossed over the Jordan. The waters of the Jordan were cut off, and these stones shall be for a memorial to the children of Israel forever. Should be as a testimony. There are times in our life, things that God has done in my life, things that God has done in your life, things that God is doing in your life, things that God did just last year. There are so many moments, if we just pause and look at what God is doing in our life, he wants us to, in essence, build a memorial around those things that he has done for us, those prayers that he has answered, the healings that he's provided, the miracles that he's made, the restoration that he's done, right? His works that are tests that he turns them into, testimonies. He turns our messes into messages. Those are some sayings, some cliche sayings that we hear, but that's what God does. He uses the things that we are faced with to get the glory out of our life. And that's what he's telling Joshua. This is why these men are going to grab those stones. And yes, they just got out of there. They're not wet because they walked through on dry ground. But I'm going to send them back in there. They don't know it yet. As I was reading this, those 12 men didn't know. They're probably like, man, we made it. And if they had families, they didn't say they had families or not, but they represented their tribes. I'm sure there was some excitement like, man, we made it. What are we getting ready to do next? I need 12 of you. Okay. You, hold on, what? I got to do what? Go back in there. At this moment, there was so much faith built. So much awareness of that God was with them. To where, as we read these verses, fear didn't have the time to set in. Because God had already told Moses and Joshua to be strong and courageous. Well, when you lead from strength and courage, when you go through these moments, fear doesn't have time to set in because you're already walking with God and you've gotten the word and you see him making the way. They just were obedient. They didn't look at the circumstances around them, say this is too much. They already knew, hey, the people who came, the 10 that came back with the bad report, they didn't make it. They died, right, due to a plague. The only 2 that made it of the spies were Caleb and Joshua. The other 10 died. If you read those verses, they didn't make it. Their report is what allowed them to stay alive because God knew that he was going to use both Joshua and Caleb. In this moment here, fear didn't have a chance to set in. So those 12 men were obedient to what Joshua had asked them to do and went right back into those waters to grab those stones. And the children of Israel did so, just as Joshua commanded, and took up 12 stones from the midst of the Jordan, just as the Lord had spoken to Joshua, according to the number of tribes of the children of Israel, and carried them over with them to the place where they lodged and laid them down there. Then Joshua set up 12 stones in the midst of the Jordan, in the place where the feet of the priests who bore the ark of the covenant stood, and they are there to this day. It's amazing playing out of God's promise, right? He told them, grab a stone, take it to the place where you're lodging, and then we immediately see in Joshua communicating that to those men, them going in there, grabbing those stones, and being obedient to take those to the lodging place so that they can set those up as a testimony of what God did for them in that moment. What has God done for you today, yesterday, last week, last year, 2 years ago, 5 years ago? What has God done for you? And have you acknowledged it? Have I acknowledged it? Am I sharing it? The things that God is doing? Because this was a testimony as we study the book of Joshua. Everything that God did for them was a testimony throughout the land. People were trembled. And they were quaked at the children of Israel coming because of how God was supporting and backing up Joshua and the children of Israel. All right, so let's look at verse 9. Then Joshua set up the 12 stones in the midst of the Jordan. We looked at that. Verse 10. So the priest who bore the ark stood in the midst of the Jordan until everything was finished. Obedience. They all got across the Jordan, right? When they get across the Jordan, we don't know how long it took. We know it's a lot of people. They get across the Jordan. God still has to give further instructions. Because if the Jordan is going that way, and I'm one of the priests, and I'm standing here in the water, with my feet in the water, holding the covenant, and everybody's exiting here in front, you still got the priests who are standing here holding it. What about them? How are they going to get across? So the priest in verse 10 said, the priest who bore the ark stood in the midst of the Jordan until everything was finished that the Lord commanded Joshua to speak to the people, according to all that Moses had commanded Joshua. And the people hurried across, hurried and crossed over. They stayed in place until everything was spoken. No fear, no worrying about the elements, no worrying about the conditions, not complaining how cold and how windy and whatever the environment were. These were men, these were priests who understood what God was doing in this moment. And when we look at it from a leadership standpoint, not everybody's called to be a Joshua. Not everybody's called to be the priest that stood and hold the Ark of the Covenant. Can we find our joy? Can we find our place in being a part of the end of verse 10, where it says, and the people hurried and crossed over? Can we find joy in the fact that we may just be a part of the people who are hurrying and crossing over and experiencing God moving and speaking to our leaders and God showing up and revealing himself, right? And showing up in a mighty way. Not everybody's going to be a priest holding up ark. Not everybody's going to be the one that's sent back into the middle of the Jordan to grab a stone and take it to the place where the lodging. Not everybody's going to be Joshua. Somebody has to be led, right? And be excited about what God is doing. And for many of us, that's our place. And that's for all of us. We're all children of God, right? And we're all being led, and we all have a place in God's family and in what God is doing. So never discount, oh man, he didn't send me to go get the stone. Or they didn't ask me to hold the Ark of the Covenant. All I'm doing is just bringing my family across the Jordan, just making it to the other side and going to the lodging place. What a blessing. What a blessing to be a part of what God is doing. And that's where we want to find ourselves. Lord, where am I at in your grand scheme of things, in your plan? What do you have for me and my family? And these people hurried across out of what God was doing. Verse 11, then it came to pass when all the people had completely crossed over, that the ark of the Lord and the priests crossed over in the presence of the people, and the men of Reuben, the men of Gad, the half tribe of Manasseh, crossed over armed before the children of Israel, as Moses had spoken to them. As Moses. Who's leading here? Moses or Joshua? It's God leading Moses and Joshua. You know what I love, as I've been reading this, and I wrote this down, that Joshua embraced his association with Moses. He embraced his covering. You know, Pastor said it months ago of not feeling like you need to go out there and make a name for yourself. God has given us a name above all names. Right? So Joshua was totally at peace, and he embraced his association with the Lord and also his association with Moses. And so for him to reiterate something to the people he was leading, hey, this is what Moses said, or this is what God said to Moses, is just a beautiful picture for us all of embracing the process of being raised up by God. Because that's what really made Moses just a powerful leader. Verse 13, about 40,000 prepared for war, crossed over before the Lord for battle to the Plains of Jericho. On that day, the Lord exalted Joshua in the sight of all Israel, and they all feared him, as they feared Moses all the days of his life. Like Pastor said, underline that. All the days of his life. So we see they had the same amount of respect and fear for Joshua as they did for Moses, because of how God just showed up for them. Verse 13, about 40,000 prepared for war crossed over before the Lord for battle to the Plains of Jericho. 40,000 people. Didn't talk about families and livestock, wherever else they was leading. But this is there's a lot of people. A lot of people. We see different things happening, riots and marches going on in the street, and the helicopter pan. They're like, oh, it was 5,000 people in the streets of Oakland. Like, man, 5,000, that's a lot. Can you imagine 40,000? 40,000. You know, everybody at a stadium. 30,000 stadium, 40,000 person stadium. 40,000, not including everybody else. So we don't know actually how many, but it was a lot of people that had to go through this. So just imagine the priest in the water holding the covenant, y'all, doing that for at least 40,000 people to pass through. They had to be in tune with God. They had to be obedient and understand the purpose of what their role was, right? And do we understand the purpose of what our role is in the grand scheme of God's plan? And if we don't, he will continue to reveal it to us, just like he's doing tonight, revealing what he's looking for in his leaders and what he's looking for in his children as followers of Christ. So we see here in verse 14 that on that day, the Lord exalted Joshua in the sight of all Israel. He had already inaugurated him, right, in the Tabernacle of Meeting when it was him and Moses. He was already assistant to Moses, so he saw how Moses approached the Lord. Well, this is the Lord saying in this moment, because of what he just did through the Jordan, God saying, I'm backing him up. Then the Lord spoke to Joshua saying, command the priest who bear the ark of the testimony to come up from the Jordan. He finally gets to the priests who are in the Jordan. Who knows how long they stood there, but God is he doesn't leave anything out. First things first, get them across the Jordan. Okay, they're across the Jordan. Second thing, get 12 leaders. You know how to get 12 leaders. You were chosen as a 12 leader before. I want you to pick 12 people from each tribe, communicate to them what they're doing. They might be a little nervous, but send them right back in there to get the 12 stones, put them on the shoulder. They're going to put them in a place where we're lodging so we can build a memorial. Got it? On one, ready, break. Bam, they do that. They come back. He's still got to keep all the people who have crossed over, make sure that they stay focused on what they're supposed to be doing, that nobody move before we get the next instruction from the Lord. Well, the next instruction from the Lord is, I didn't forget about my priests. I didn't forget about those who've been holding it down, those who've been pillars leading my people. I didn't forget about you and the work that you put in and doing stuff that other people don't want to do and doing the hard work and being obedient and not murmuring amongst each others as priests. If God's told us to hold this covenant, we're going to do it until the people cross, and we're going to stand there and hold this until God tells us something different. And they were obedient to that point to where Joshua was able to hear. He didn't have to say, Lord, what about the priests? What about the priests? Okay, I got them. And he didn't have to ask God any of that. He knew that the Lord was going to speak to him. So he did that in verse 15. Verse 15. Then the Lord spoke to Joshua saying, command the priests who bear the ark of the testimony to come up out of the Jordan. Joshua therefore commanded the priests, saying, come up from the Jordan. Come up from the Jordan. Come on, y'all. Let's go. Get out of there. Hurry up. No, he didn't say that. 40,000 people and you at the Jordan River, he had to be yelling, come on up. They was waiting for that anyway. And it came to pass when the priests who bore the ark and the covenant of the Lord had come from the midst of the Jordan, and the soles of the priests' feet touched dry land, that the waters of the Jordan returned to their place and overflowed all its banks as before. It wasn't until those priests got out of that water that they were standing in for we don't know how long, but just imagine how long it would take to move 40,000 people 4 blocks, 5 blocks, however long the crossing was. Just the street with a police barricade in nowadays time. It would take a little bit of time to get 40,000 people and families to move somewhere. Ain't no telling how long they were in that water, but they were obedient to God, and God didn't forget their obedience because he needed them going forward. And he really did it for the Ark of the Covenant's sake. When they stepped into the water, it was because of what they were carrying. God was protecting the Ark of the Covenant. When we carry the Ark of the Covenant, he sends us to our job. He sends us to wherever he's sending us. If we're bearing the Ark of the Covenant, that's what the Lord is going to be protecting. His word in us, our association with him. Not trying to create a name for ourselves, embracing who he's called us to be and saying, Lord, I thank you that I'm one of the children. Right? And when you're speaking, Lord, let me hear your voice. And it came to pass, as the priest who bore the ark of the covenant of the Lord had come up from the midst of the Jordan, and the soles of the priest's feet touched the dry land, that the waters of the Jordan returned to their places and overflowed as its banks before. Now the people came up from the Jordan on the 10th day of the first month, and they camped in Gilgal on the east border of Jericho. And those 12 stones which they took out of the Jordan, Joshua set up in Gilgal. He already knew what to do with the stones because God told him. Then he spoke to the children of Israel, saying, when your children ask their fathers in time to come, saying, what are these stones? Then you should let your children know, saying, Israel crossed over on dry land, for the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan before you until they crossed over. Tell them what I did, how I did it. Tell them about the conditions. Tell them about if you had any fear and anxiety, how God overcame that, how God's promises are yes and amen. No matter what he puts before you, he's able to get you through it. God wanted them to brag on him. Verse 23, for the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan before you until you had crossed over, as the Lord your God did the Red Sea. As I just read that, it's almost like the things that were meant to be detours, whether the enemy put it in front of us or it's just something that's there that we just have to get through, right? The Jordan wasn't an enemy, right? And no one was pursuing them like it was in the Red Sea. That was a different situation. But God's same result was the same. Part of it got him through safely. All right, let's wrap up here. Looking at verse 23. For the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan before you until you had crossed over, as he did with the Red Sea, which he dried up before you until we had crossed over. That all the peoples of the earth, this is why he did it, may know the hand of the Lord, that it is mighty, and that you may fear the Lord forever. Forever. Meaning you should be talking about this. We're talking about it. When we think, Lord, how do I hear from you? Like Joshua. How do I know when you're speaking to me? Should I go? Should I stay? What about the priest there? What about this? It's through the word. It's through how God speaks to his people. We saw the same instruction he gave Moses was the same instruction that he gave Joshua, a representative from each 12. And he gave them instructions. It's as we spend time with the Lord and we see how he speaks to his men and women through the word, he speaks to us the same way. And so I hope tonight, as we looked at the qualities of Joshua, some of the things that I wrote down is that he wholly followed the Lord. He wholly followed the Lord. He believed God's report. Right? He believed God's report. He learned of God. He embraced being raised up. He embraced the process. He embraced the process of going from assistant to a spy to a leader to then the one who was going to lead. He didn't skip a step. He was okay with being associated with Moses and being Moses' assistant. He was content with continuing and carrying on the mission that God had. You know, Joshua was someone who ran his leg of the race. My daughter ran track. She runs track right now. My wife was a collegiate track athlete, so they know all about relays and running your leg of the race. Well, that's what Joshua did here. He ran his leg of the race. But it wasn't, when you look at how God raised up leaders, how he raised up Joshua was different than how he raised up David. How he raised up Joshua was different than how he raised up, the disciples. Joshua was raised up in the presence of God, recognizing it, loving it, learning how to hear from God, because he needed to use those same qualities as he led the children of Israel. As we read this and as we continue to go through this whole book of Joshua, be strong and courageous was something that the Lord said to Joshua, but it's also something that Moses said to Joshua. Why? Because leading at least 40,000 people through the Jordan, some fear is going to try to keep creeping there, right? So the things that Joshua needed, he needs to know I'm going to be with you all your life, but he also needs to know don't be, when fear and weakness tries to creep in, do the exact opposite. He valued God's presence. What I love here is Moses saw in Joshua what God saw in Joshua. And then eventually the people saw that in Joshua as well. And then it's just an awesome picture for us to see how God promoted Joshua from assistant to spy to leader. It's a generational thing. This drawing right here is something that my daughter did. And what that is, it's a scroll being passed down from one generation to the next. At the end of the day, the greatest thing that Moses did, he may not have experienced the promised land because God said he wasn't going to experience it. He was going to hand it over to Joshua to do it. But he fulfilled his job. He led him as far as he could. And when it was time to hand over the baton, the person who he handed over to Joshua was raised up in the presence of God. He earned God's respect, the respect of the people, and he did it the way God wanted it to be done. For you and I, as we just go through our life, there's things that God is saying, okay, I'm preparing you for this. And a lot of us are like relay, when you're waiting on that baton, sometimes the hand is back there and you're looking like, come on, hurry up. You got to just relax and wait for it to get to, wait for the transfer to happen. In the meantime, let's continue to pursue God, pursue his presence, be open and excited for what God has for us as his children, knowing that he's preparing us to, at the end of the day, accomplish his mission, just like Joshua was faithful to accomplish God's mission in this particular portion of his life. So before we dismiss, let's go ahead and pray. Father, I thank you for all that you're doing. Lord, I thank you that you are a generational Father, that you see it all from the beginning to the end. You don't miss anything. You even care about the priest who was standing in the water for how long, we don't know, but you didn't forget about them. You didn't forget about the stones that needed to be taken out. And though they didn't understand why you were sending back in to get it after they had already crossed out, it was all a part of your plan, Lord. And I thank you for the instructions that you spoke to Joshua and how it was clear and how he communicated it to the people. Lord, I pray that as you speak to us, that it will be clear, that we won't have to question. But if we don't clearly hear from you, that we would trust in the counsel of the men and women that you placed to lead our church and to lead us. That we may not have the answers to it, but we can trust in the word of the Lord from the men and from the women that you called to lead us here at the Well Christian Community. Lord, I pray that you would just allow us all to find your place, to find our place in your plan. That we will follow you wholeheartedly, that we will believe the report that you're showing us. And I just pray that as we go about our day, Lord God, and as you're showing us things pertaining to our family, pertaining our neighborhood, pertaining the world, that we will see what you're doing and that we will believe your report. Those things are getting darker and we're seeing wars and rumors of wars. We know that you are doing something with your church and we just want to be prepared and we want to be ready for when you call our name. We love you. We thank you. In Jesus' mighty name, amen. Hope you guys are blessed. See you next Wednesday. And don't forget, we will see you Friday, Good Friday prayer, 7 p.m. to midnight. Have a good night.